Today we're going to take a look at dominant and recessive inheritance patterns. So what we know is that we get half of our genetic information from each parent. Okay, so we get half of our genetic info each parent. We can use this information about parents to predict our traits in offspring. So we can use the idea that someone may have brown eyes and another person might have blue eyes. We can predict the probability that their children will have either brown or blue eyes using what we're going to call Punnet squares. This is all possible because of our DNA. We go into a much more detail about DNA very shortly, but what you should know is that we get a chromosome from each parent. Actually, we get 23 chromosomes from each parent, and they're all identical. They pair up. So this chromosome could come from my mom, and this chromosome comes from my dad. They are the same size and they have the same genetic information on them, just slightly different. So for instance, I may have a gene for my hair type, okay? And on this chromosome from both my mom and my dad, I have the gene for hair type here. I get a specific allele, okay, from my mom, and I get a specific allele from my dad. And depending on how these two interact with one another, will dictate what type of hair I get, okay? So, alleles determine our traits, and they are located on genes in our DNA. Okay, so one allele can be dominant and one allele can be recessive. In the case of hair type, the dominant trait is curly hair. So for example, curly hair. If I get the curly hair allele from either of my parents, I will be guaranteed to have curly hair. I only need one of them to get curly hair. If curly hair is dominant, then I hope we can understand that straight hair is recessive. Okay? What this means is that dominant will always take over. If one allele is dominant, we have that dominant trait. To get a recessive trait to show, both of the traits that we get from our parents must be recessive. We're going to get to this and we're going to talk about it in great detail. So let's define the idea of dominant versus recessive. A dominant gene is an inherited allele or trait that always shows up in an offspring. If present, I should add. So if one of them is dominant, doesn't matter what the other one is, we have that trait. A recessive trait is an inherited trait or allele, an inherited trait or allele that shows up or appears only when paired with another recessive. Okay. A recessive gene will not show up when it's paired with dominant. All right, this is all a little fuzzy, I'm sure, but let's get to it. Dominant traits, when we're doing our Punnet squares, will always be represented with an uppercase letter. Okay, so uppercase, always. Recessive traits will be shown with a lowercase. So make sure that you are comfortable with that. It's kind of tricky if we have like C and little c. It's really important that you make that very clear. Okay. I was so unlucky to have received 2 recessive hair genes because I have straight hair. That means that I must have gotten the straight hair gene from my mom and from my dad. I had no hope of getting curly hair. With that, because there are 2 recessive genes, I have straight hair. However, if I'd been so lucky to have gotten a curly hair gene from one of my parents, I would have been guaranteed to have curly hair. Doesn't matter what the other gene was from my second parent. If I'd gotten both curly genes, yay me, it didn't matter. The moment I had one of them, I had curly hair. So genotype is our actual genes. It is the letters that show the expressed trait. So the letters that show the alleles in an individual. So for instance, in our example, it could be H, little h, or little h, little h. All right. So it's like the science way of saying you have this kind of hair. The phenotype, though, is what we see. What we actually see in a person. So if someone had big H, little h, where big H meant they had a curly hair allele and they had a little h, so a straight hair allele, they will have curly hair. However, if somebody had 2 little h's, that would mean that they get straight hair. So this is whether we see curly versus straight hair. Those are examples. Okay, so if I ask for the genotype, I'm asking for the actual letters. If I am asking for the phenotype, it's what we actually see. All right. A couple more things. To be homozygous means the same. Homozygous means the same. What this means is that both alleles are dominant. Okay, so in this case, that would be like big H, big H. Again, it doesn't matter what the second H was here. This individual will show the dominant trait. Heterozygous means that one allele is dominant and one allele is recessive. So what this would look like is big H and little h. Big H is the one we are going to see. Okay, so this is the one that shows up. Little h is kind of masked or hidden. So this individual will have curly hair, but they are said to be a carrier of the straight hair gene. All right, and then homozygous recessive is when both alleles are recessive. Again, homozygous meaning the same. And so in this case, recessive. So little h, this is the only way we are going to see an individual with the recessive gene. So it's the only way a recessive gene is expressed, or the only way we get to see that individual with that trait. Okay, so now we're going to come to the idea of Punnet squares. So remember that all of our cells have a full complement of DNA. Okay, so for instance, if you were someone that might have curly hair, and a carrier, so you were heterozygous for curly hair, your cells all contain this DNA. Okay, so this would be our parent DNA. Our sex cells are formed by our DNA splitting, so formation of sex cells. So this is the formation of eggs or sperm. And so each of our sex cells will get only one set of DNA. So the gametes can either, in this case, have the curly hair gene or the straight hair gene. Then, of course, we have a secondary parent, and their genes will also have done the same thing, creating gametes. Let's say that this parent is also curly-haired, heterozygous. So let's go ahead and try this in a Punnet square. So parent 1 has curly hair. So I'm going to draw in their curly hair. They're going to have blue hair in this case. Okay, and we know that parent 1 in this case was heterozygous. So that means that they have either a big H gamete, a sex cell, or a little h gamete, or sex cell. Okay, remember this would happen in like one egg. They have a 50-50 chance, this is saying, of passing on that gene. Now, our second parent, I'm going to give them their curly hair because we're going to say that they are also heterozygous. Okay, and they have curly red hair. I'm just trying to show two different parents. All right, and this parent has big H and little h as well. Okay, again, where big H stands for curly hair. It's always good to note. And our little h stands for straight hair. So we've defined our variables here. Okay, a Punnet square just takes this information and combines it. So we have the opportunity for one of our sex cell options, big H from parent 1, to combine with either sex cell option from parent 2. So the way we represent this is that parent 1 is going to donate this big H. When parent 2's sex cell joins, we are going to have, in this case, the opportunity of one big H combining with another big H to give us big H, big H. The other option is that big H will combine with a little h sex cell. Okay, so these are the options if parent 1's sex cell was a big H. But remember, it's a 50-50 shot. Parent 1's sex cell could have also been a little h. So it's standard to write the little letters second. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to write the little h here. But it could have combined with this sex cell for parent 2. So we could have gotten a big H. Or little h from parent 1 could have combined with little h from parent 2. So you can see that I've just written the little h in both of the bottom squares here and the big red H in both of the top squares. And then I did the same thing from here. Big H from both and little h from both. Okay, if we were to investigate this, we can see that we get one offspring with big H, another offspring with H, little h, another one with H, little h, and one with just little h, little h. So I get 1 in 4 that are big H. This is a 25% chance. Okay. I also get only 1 in 4. So a 25% chance of little h. But we can see that we got 2 big H, little h's. So that tells me that I got 2 in 4 chance of getting an offspring with big H, little h, or a 50% chance. So these are all of the genotypes. I have a 25% chance of big H genotype. I have a 50% chance of big H, little h phenotype in this case. And I have a 25% chance of little h phenotype. However, if I were to look at the phenotype, what I see, okay, I'm going to write it in my little corner here, phenotype. In this case, remember, anytime there's a big H, that is what we see. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 of our offspring will have curly hair. Okay, so that means 75% of the kids here will have curly hair. And in our case, 1 in 4 will have straight hair because they have 2 recessive genes. Okay, so the genotype percentages may look different than the phenotype percentages. Let's do some more practice, maybe just on the back of your page here. So again, we have 2 alleles for each gene within our DNA. One allele comes from one of our parents. The other allele comes from our other parent. This half of each genetic information was stored in an egg or a sperm cell. And our Punnet squares show the probability when we combine from each parent. So let's keep going with our curly hair and straight hair because that was really, we've already defined it. Sorry, I was using H's. What was I thinking here? So let's keep going with curly hair as big H and straight hair as our little h. So I'm just going to redefine it because we're on the other side of the page and I don't want to get confused. So we did a heterozygous parent with a heterozygous parent. Let's try 2 homozygous maybe. So let's try an example where we have 2 homozygous dominant parents. So to draw a Punnet square, we're just going to simplify what we just had into something like this. Okay, where the information from one parent is here and the information for our other parent is here. We have 2 homozygous dominant parents, meaning that we have only the dominant allele. So in this case, we'll have big H, combining with big H, big H. And we'll put those in like this. We'll split the big H that was green, and in our case, the big H that was blue. When we combine, we bring a big H into both of our, these are our offspring squares. Okay. And then we're going to do that in both cases. And then we're also going to bring the green big H's in, showing the combination from each parent. So if I were to look at the genotype here, the only kind of genotype I get in my offspring is big H, big H. And I get 4 out of my 4 options are this way, so that means that's 100%. My phenotype, because every single square has a big H in it, that means that absolutely all of the little offspring here will have curly hair. So 100% will be curly hair. Let's try it again. Let's try a homozygous recessive and a homozygous dominant. So we'll draw our Punnet square. Okay. This is, again, the only piece I really and truly need for the Punnet square, but it can be helpful to list our information. So we have a homozygous recessive parent, so that means we have 2 little h's. And we also have a homozygous dominant parent, so 2 big H's. We split those up, 1 in each part of our Punnet square. And then where we start to combine in the yellow here is what our offspring would look like. So a big H all the way across from this parent, and we're going to do the same thing across here. Again, it's kind of an unwritten rule that you always put the big letter first, because as soon as a big letter is there, it's dominant. It will have that trait. And then we're going to bring down the little h's, and we can see that once again we have 100% of our offspring looking the same. So our genotype, all of our offspring are big H, little h, so 100%. And the phenotype, what we are going to see, remember, if there's a big H present, we only see that trait. So all of our offspring here are going to have curly hair again. Okay, let's keep practicing. Let's do, I don't know, one more. So let's say we have, for example, let's have an A with a big A, little a with big A, big A. Okay, so we could say this was heterozygous with a homozygous dominant. Now I'm going to show the Punnet square as I would do it without colors, just on a regular test or quiz. Remember, we put parent 1 here. It actually doesn't matter where each one goes, whether you put them on the side or the top. And then our second parent here. Crossing them over, I'm going to carry my A over from my side parent here. And I'm also going to carry the A over at the bottom. Then I'm going to drop the A down from the top. Again, it doesn't matter really the order you do here. Big A and a big A from the top, and a little A and a little A from the top. So you can kind of see that I went like this and like this. All right, so let's write the genotype. Okay, the genotype, I have two different genotypes here. I have two that are big A, so let's list that. So I have a big A, and 2 out of my 4 were big A, and that means that it was 50%. I also had a big A, little a option, and I can see that 2 out of my 4 were big A, little a. So that's another 50%. The phenotype here, I can see that every option for offspring has a big A in it. That means, oh, sorry, I don't know why I switched to A's and I was supposed to be using H's, but let's just continue with our curly versus straight hair. Sorry, team, it's getting a little late over here. Okay, back to our phenotype. My bad. Okay, so big A, big A, big A, big A. It doesn't matter who else it's with. All of our offspring, so 100%, have big A, which means they are, in our case, curly hair because I changed my letters halfway through. So sorry. Okay. Hopefully we're feeling a little bit more confident and able to take a look at this. I'm going to give you some practice so that you're going to get some individual practice and get better at it on your own. Make sure you'd practice. It looks easy when I'm doing it, but it might be a little bit more tricky when you try it yourself.